In the quiet hours before the sun climbed over the peaks surrounding Skopje, Martin's world was already vibrating. His studio was a sanctuary of humming processors and neon strips that painted the walls in electric blues and violets. To millions, he was GP, a burst of energy contained within a rectangular screen. But here, in the stillness, he was the architect of a digital universe. He sat before his array of monitors, the glow reflecting in his eyes, as he prepared to bridge the gap between his reality and the world's imagination. The notifications arrived like a rhythmic tide, pings of appreciation, questions from the curious, and the heavy weight of expectation. Martin held his smartphone, the screen a waterfall of scrolling names and icons. In the modern age, a creator never truly sleeps. The digital sun is always at its zenith. He felt the pull of the GP persona, a character built on joy and play, demanding he step out of the shadows and into the relentless light of the public eye. That afternoon, a young man named Vedran waited outside the studio doors, clutching a vintage camera as if it were a shield. Vedran was 18, standing on the precipice of his own adulthood, and to him, Martin was the North Star of the internet. When the door opened, Martin didn't offer the rehearsed grin of a celebrity. He offered a firm handshake and a seat. He saw in Vedran the same restless spark that had ignited his own journey years ago. "They see the highlights, Vedran," Martin said, gesturing to the complex editing software on his screen. The timeline was a mosaic of thousands of tiny clips, a puzzle that took days to assemble for a mere 10 minutes of joy. He showed the young creator the cut files, the mistakes, the stutters, and the moments where the energy failed. He wanted Vedran to see that the master of pixels was, first and foremost, a laborer of light and sound. Suddenly, the studio went dark. A cooling fan whined and died, and the monitors flickered into an abyssal black. A server had crashed, threatening to erase the massive project Martin had been preparing for his anniversary broadcast. The silence was deafening, a vacuum where the digital pulse usually throbbed. Martin leaned back, his silhouette a sharp contrast against the dead screens, feeling the sudden, cold sting of technical failure. Vedran didn't stay a spectator. He knelt by the cooling towers, his hands moving with a precision that surprised even Martin. Together, they navigated the labyrinth of cables and backup drives. Martin bypassed the software errors while Vedran swapped out the scorched hardware. In that cramped space under the desk, the barrier between the icon and the student vanished. They were simply two craftsmen fixing a broken machine. The power surged back, and the GP logo bloomed across the screens once more. Martin didn't waste a second. He adjusted his headset, the familiar adrenaline returning to his veins. As the live indicator turned a vivid crimson, he looked into the lens. This time, however, he wasn't just performing. He felt the presence of the room, the tangibility of the struggle they had just overcome, and his voice carried a new, grounded resonance. After the stream ended and the viewership numbers stabilized into the hundreds of thousands, the studio returned to its quiet hum. Martin and Vedran sat on a low sofa, the tension of the day dissolving into a shared exhaustion. "The screen is a bridge, not a wall," Martin mused, looking at the young man. "If you only show the perfection, you never really reach the other side. People need to see the hands that build the bridge." They left the studio and walked toward the Vardar River, where the ancient stone bridge stood as a silent witness to centuries of change. The air was cool and smelled of rain and stone. Martin didn't pull out his phone to document the moment. He simply watched the water flow, reminding himself that while the digital world was his craft, this, the wind, the cold, the conversation, was his fuel. As they parted ways, Vedran held his camera with a renewed confidence. Martin watched him disappear into the city lights, knowing that the next generation was already finding its rhythm. He returned to his studio, stepped before the camera one last time that night, and gave his signature sign-off. He wasn't just a content creator. He was a reminder that in a world of fleeting pixels, the connections we make are the only things that truly endure.